This is probably going to hit a nerve, but stay with me for a second. Imagine this. Your partner dances with a coworker at a company party. Nothing officially wrong happens. No betrayal, no crossing the obvious line. And yet, something inside you tightens. You feel it. That quiet discomfort you can't fully explain. So here's the real question. At what point are you allowed to feel something? At what point does your reaction stop being called insecurity and start being called awareness? Let's break this down through real situations, because theory is useless if it doesn't match reality. There was a guy who shared a story about his relationship. Everything seemed fine on the surface. His girlfriend would go to work events, celebrate birthdays with colleagues, maybe dance with someone. Nothing extreme, no clear reason to accuse her of anything. But every time it happened, he felt that subtle tension in his chest. Not enough to confront, not enough to justify a reaction, but enough to linger. That's the kind of situation that confuses people the most, because logically, you tell yourself it's nothing. But emotionally, it doesn't feel like nothing. Here's the uncomfortable truth. In modern relationships, the only thing that is clearly labeled as wrong is outright cheating. Everything else lives in a gray area. A woman can dance with other men, accept attention, dress in ways that attract it, engage in playful conversations, and all of it can still be framed as acceptable behavior. But ask yourself something simple. Have you ever seen a woman genuinely reject attention with something like, "No thanks, I'm taken," and actually mean it regardless of who's offering it? Not just when the guy is unattractive or awkward, but when he's confident, well-presented, and clearly desirable. The reaction changes, doesn't it? Now picture a workplace. Your partner spends hours every day around the same people. If someone there becomes interested in her, what happens next depends entirely on how she behaves. If she keeps distance, avoids unnecessary engagement, stays neutral, the interest fades quickly. But if she laughs at his jokes, gives him attention, responds warmly, maintains eye contact, she's not just being nice. She's feeding the interaction, and that's where things start. Because betrayal doesn't begin in the bedroom. It begins in small decisions. The moment someone chooses attention from the outside over the comfort and respect of their relationship, that's the starting point. People love to say, if you're jealous, you're insecure. But let's take that logic further. How far does it go? What exactly are you supposed to tolerate before you're considered confident? Where is the line? Because if confidence means watching your partner flirt, accept attention, or allow others to cross subtle boundaries without reacting, then what are we even measuring anymore? Real confidence isn't about pretending you don't see what's happening. It's about recognizing it clearly. There was another situation, a group of people sitting together playing games, harmless setting. But one of the men started behaving differently toward another guy's partner, giving her subtle compliments, helping her more than necessary, treating her with a certain kind of attention. Not obvious enough to call out, just enough to feel. That's the kind of behavior people brush off as nothing. But patterns don't come out of nowhere. If someone feels comfortable acting like that in front of others, it's rarely the beginning of the story. And here's the key part, the reaction of the woman. A person who values their relationship creates distance from that kind of attention. They shut it down early. Not aggressively, not dramatically, but clearly. They don't encourage it. But when that boundary isn't there, things escalate. In that case, the story ended exactly how you'd expect. What started as harmless interaction turned into something more. First emotional closeness, then deeper involvement. It didn't happen overnight, it never does. And that's something people miss. They think betrayal is a single moment. It's not. It's a process. Another example, a guy discovers that his girlfriend is messaging another man. Not openly flirting, not sending anything explicit, just talking. But in those conversations, she complains about her relationship. She shares frustrations, says she feels misunderstood. That's not harmless, because the moment someone starts seeking emotional understanding outside the relationship, they are already shifting their connection. It's no longer about solving problems together. It's about finding comfort elsewhere. And comfort leads somewhere. It always does. There's a progression to these situations. It starts with allowing contact, then comes engagement, then comes interest, and finally, emotional dependency. By the time someone is venting about you to another man, the situation is already far beyond just talking. At that point, logic and discussions won't fix it because she's no longer looking for solutions. She's looking for someone who makes her feel better. And that kind of dynamic almost always ends the same way. Now let's talk about another shift that catches people off guard: self-improvement. A woman starts going to the gym, takes better care of herself, changes her appearance. At first, it seems like a positive thing, and it is, in isolation. But behavior changes with it. She stops wanting to go with you, starts enjoying attention from others, talks about compliments she receives, posts more revealing photos. Individually, none of these actions prove anything, but together, they create a pattern. Because environments matter, a gym is a place filled with constant visual stimulation, interaction, and attention. It's one of the easiest places to meet new people. Conversations start effortlessly, contact becomes natural, and if someone is already open to that attention, it accelerates everything. There are countless stories where this exact shift led to the same outcome. Increased attention leads to increased validation, and when that validation becomes addictive, priorities change. Now consider a different scenario. A woman starts working in a field where she constantly interacts with clients one-on-one. Long conversations, personal contact, emotional engagement. Again, nothing wrong on paper. But proximity and opportunity are powerful forces. The more time people spend in close, personal interaction, the higher the chances of emotional connection forming, especially when boundaries aren't strict. In many cases, what begins as professional interaction slowly becomes something more personal. Conversations extend beyond work, messages become more frequent, and eventually, lines blur. This isn't about one specific profession or environment, it's about understanding how context influences behavior. And if you look at patterns over time, certain situations come up again and again. Workplaces, authority figures, fitness environments, former partners, close social circles. These are the most common points where boundaries get tested, not because people plan it, but because proximity, familiarity, and opportunity create conditions where it becomes easy. So what do you actually do with this? You don't panic. You don't become paranoid. That's not the goal. The goal is awareness. Pay attention to changes, not isolated actions, but patterns, shifts in behavior, communication, priorities. If something feels off, don't ignore it just because you can't logically prove anything. Instincts exist for a reason. At the same time, don't jump to conclusions without observation. There's a balance between blindness and paranoia. Relationships don't collapse in a single moment. They erode gradually through small decisions that seem insignificant on their own. And by the time the final line is crossed, most of the work has already been done. So the real question isn't, should you be jealous? The real question is, are you paying attention early enough to understand what's actually happening?